The council chamber was filled with noise. Dozens of alien species sat in their designated seats, their voices creating a strange symphony of clicks, whistles, and growls. The air smelled different here, a mixture of chemicals and atmospheres that each species needed to survive. Dae-sung stood in the center of it all, his boots planted firmly on the polished floor, feeling very small and very human. He was a tall man by human standards, but here he was nothing special. The Krillian representative towered over everyone at nearly 4 meters high. The insectoid delegates had limbs that could crush steel. Even the peaceful species had their own kinds of strength that humans could never match. But Dae-sung had not come here to compete. He had come because he was asked. Beside him stood Ambassador Hee-jin of the Velen people. She was small, even for her species, with pale blue skin and large eyes that seemed to absorb everything around her. Her people had no weapons, no military, no concept of violence in their entire history. They were prey animals who had somehow achieved space travel through pure cooperation and intelligence, and now they needed protection. The Galactic Council Overseer, a creature named Thrain, rose from his seat. He was massive, covered in dark chitin that reflected the lights overhead. His multiple eyes focused on Dae-sung with what might have been curiosity or contempt. It was hard to tell with his species. "We are here to discuss a concerning matter," Thrain announced, his voice amplified through the chamber. "The Velen delegation has hired human contractors for security. This raises questions." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Dae-sung could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on him, some curious, some hostile, some afraid. Humans were still new to this galactic community. They had only made contact 15 years ago, and their reputation had preceded them. A species that had nearly destroyed itself in countless wars. A species that built weapons before they built proper homes. A species that some called dangerous. "Ambassador Hee-jin," Thrain continued, "your people are known for your peaceful nature. You have never raised a hand in violence. Why would you trust humans of all species to guard your door? They are warriors. They carry weapons. Their history is written in blood." Hee-jin started to speak, but Dae-sung gently touched her arm. She looked at him, and he gave a small nod. This was his question to answer. "Overseer Thrain," Dae-sung said, his voice steady and clear. "You ask why the Velens trust us. The answer is simple. Because I protected them first, before they ever paid me, before there was a contract, before anyone asked." Thrain's mandibles clicked together in what might have been skepticism. "Explain." Dae-sung looked around the chamber. He saw the doubt on their faces, alien and human expressions of disbelief. They saw a mercenary, a gun for hire, someone who killed for credits. They did not see the truth yet, but they would. "6 months ago," Dae-sung began, "my crew and I were running cargo in the outer systems. We were not soldiers then, just people trying to survive, hauling freight from one station to another. We barely had enough fuel for the next jump. Our ship was old and falling apart. We had nothing to offer anyone." He paused, remembering that day. The cold of space, the red warning lights on his console, the fear in Ji-woo's voice as she called out the distress signal. "We picked up a distress beacon, a Velen transport under attack by Kreth pirates. They had no weapons, no shields worth anything, just a plea for help broadcast into the void, hoping someone would hear. Someone would care." The chamber had grown quiet now. Even the species that did not understand human expressions could sense the weight in his words. "We had a choice," Dae-sung continued. "We could ignore it, jump away, pretend we heard nothing. We had no contract with the Velens, no obligation, no promise of payment. And we knew that if we went to help, we might not survive. The Kreth do not take kindly to interference." Thrain leaned forward slightly. "Yet you went." "We went," Dae-sung confirmed. My pilot Jiwoo set a course straight into that fight. My engineer Tai Yang got our old weapons online, knowing they might explode in our faces. And we fought, not because we were paid, not because we were ordered, but because someone needed help, and we could give it. He could see Hee-jin beside him, her large eyes glistening slightly. She remembered that day, too. She had been on that transport. The fight nearly killed us. We took hits that our ship still carries scars from. Tae Yang was injured and spent weeks recovering. We used ammunition we could not afford to replace. When it was over, the pirates fled and the Velen transport was safe. Dae-sung looked directly at Thrain. The Velens asked us why we did it. They could not understand. In their world, everyone helps everyone because it is simply what you do. But they knew that in this galaxy, that is not how it works. So they asked, and I told them the truth. Which was? Thrain asked. Because you needed help, and we could give it. That is all. No other reason was necessary. The chamber was silent. Dae-sung could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. He knew what came next would determine everything. Ambassador Hee-jin was on that transport, Dae-sung said quietly. She saw what humans could do when we chose to protect instead of destroy. She saw that we asked for nothing in return. And when her people needed security for these negotiations, she remembered. She remembered that when her people called out into the darkness, humans answered. Thrain sat back in his seat. His many eyes studied Dae-sung for a long moment. Pretty words, the overseer finally said. But words are easy. Actions define truth. We shall see if humans can truly be trusted with the safety of the innocent. Dae-sung nodded slowly. Yes, overseer. You will see. As the council session continued, Dae-sung stood his ground. He knew that this was only the beginning. The real test was yet to come. 6 months earlier, the cargo ship Wanderer drifted through empty space like a piece of forgotten debris. Inside the cramped cockpit, Jiwoo stared at the fuel gauge with growing concern. The numbers were not good. They never were these days. We have enough for 2 more jumps, she said, not looking away from the display. Maybe 3 if we cut life support to minimum. Dae-sung sat in the captain's chair, which was really just a worn seat with too many patches. He rubbed his face, feeling the rough stubble on his chin. They had not been able to afford a station stop in weeks. No hot meals, no real beds, no proper showers. Just the endless black of space and the quiet hum of failing systems. What about the cargo? He asked. If we deliver it on time, we make enough for fuel and basic repairs, Jiwoo replied. If we are late, the client will not pay the full amount. Then we are stuck. From the back of the ship, Tae Yang's voice crackled through the intercom. Hey, Captain. The starboard thruster is making that noise again. The bad noise. We might want to think about actually fixing things instead of just hoping they keep working. Dae-sung smiled despite everything. Tae Yang always managed to find humor in their situation. Put it on the list, he called back. The list is already 3 pages long, Tae Yang replied. I am going to need a bigger notebook. Jiwoo suddenly straightened in her seat. Captain, I am picking up something on the emergency channel. Dae-sung leaned forward. What is it? Distress beacon, automated, broadcasting on all frequencies. She worked the controls, her fingers moving quickly. It is a civilian transport, Velen registry. They are under attack. The words hung in the air between them. Dae-sung felt something cold settle in his stomach. He knew what this meant, what it would cost. How far? He asked quietly. 20 minutes at full burn. But Captain, our fuel... I know. Dae-sung closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about the fuel gauge, the failing systems, the cargo that needed to be delivered on time. He thought about all the very good reasons to ignore this distress call and keep flying. There were many such reasons. All of them made perfect sense. Then he thought about people dying in the dark, calling for help that would never come. "Tae-yang," he said into the intercom, "get our weapons online, whatever still works." There was a pause. Then Tae-yang's voice came back, quieter now. "Captain, if we do this, we might not have enough fuel to reach the next station, and those weapons have not been fired in 2 years. They might explode." "I know. Do it anyway." Jiwoo looked at him. Her face was tired, thin from too many skipped meals. But her eyes were steady. "Setting course," she said simply. The Wanderer turned in space, old engines burning brighter than they had in months. Dae-sung strapped himself into his seat and pulled up the weapons console. The displays flickered to life, showing systems that were barely functional. 2 missile tubes, 1 laser battery, and shields that might last 30 seconds under heavy fire. "We are insane," Tae-yang muttered over the intercom. "Just want that on record." "Noted," Dae-sung replied. The Velen transport appeared on their sensors first, then on the view screen. It was a small ship, designed for passenger travel, not combat. Its hull was already scarred with burns. Around it circled 3 Kreth fighters, sleek and deadly, taking their time with their prey. "They are toying with it," Jiwoo said, her voice tight with anger. "The transport has no weapons. They could have destroyed it already." Dae-sung's hands tightened on the controls. The Kreth were pirates, scavengers who preyed on the weak. They would board the transport soon, take everything of value, and leave the passengers to die in vacuum, unless someone stopped them. "Broadcast on all channels," Dae-sung ordered. "Tell them to back off." Jiwoo sent the message. For a moment, nothing happened. Then one of the Kreth fighters turned toward them. A response came through, filled with clicking laughter. "They say we should leave while we still can," Jiwoo translated. "They say this is not our concern." "Tell them it is now." Dae-sung fired first. The old laser battery came to life with a sound like tearing metal. The beam cut through space and caught one of the Kreth fighters on its wing. The fighter spun away, damaged but not destroyed. The other 2 Kreth ships immediately broke off from the transport and turned toward the Wanderer. Dae-sung felt his heart hammering in his chest. This was it. No turning back now. "Evasive," he ordered. Jiwoo's hands flew across the controls. The Wanderer twisted and dove, old hull groaning with the strain. Energy blasts cut through the space where they had been moments before. Alarms began to scream as their shields took hits. "Shields at 40%, Tae-yang called out. "One more pass like that and we are done." Dae-sung lined up another shot and fired both missiles. They were old, slow, probably past their expiration date. But they flew true. One missed completely, spinning off into the void. The other caught a Kreth fighter center mass and exploded in a brilliant flash. 1 down, 2 to go. But now the Wanderer was almost out of ammunition. The laser battery was overheating. Their shields were failing, and the 2 remaining Kreth fighters were circling around for another attack run. "Captain," Jiwoo said quietly, "we cannot win this." "I know, but we can buy time." Dae-sung pushed the Wanderer between the transport and the fighters. He made his ship a shield, taking hits meant for the Velens. Each impact shook the hull. Each alarm that screamed meant another system failing. "They are hailing us," Jiwoo said. "The transport." "Put them through." A voice came over the speakers, high and musical, filled with fear. "Human ship, please. You must flee. They will destroy you. We are already lost." "Not while I am still here," Dae-sung replied. He fired the laser battery again. It was barely functioning now, the beam weak and flickering. But it was enough to make the Kreth hesitate. They had expected easy prey, not a fight. "Tae-yang, how are we doing back there?" "Everything is on fire. Not literally. Mostly." Another hit rocked the ship. The lights flickered. Dae-sung could smell smoke now, acrid and sharp. They had seconds left, maybe less. Then something changed. The Kreth fighters suddenly broke off their attack and jumped away, disappearing into hyperspace. Dae-sung sat in his chair, breathing hard, not understanding. "Why did they leave?" Ji-woo asked. "Galactic Patrol," Tae-yang said. "I am picking up their signatures on long-range sensors. The Kreth must have detected them coming." Dae-sung let out a breath he had not known he was holding. They had survived. Barely. The Wanderer was a wreck, alarms still blaring, systems failing across the board. But they had survived. "The transport is hailing again," Ji-woo said. "Put them through." The voice came back, still fearful, but now filled with something else. Wonder. Perhaps. Confusion. "Human ship, why did you help us? We have nothing to pay you. We are strangers to you." Dae-sung thought about all the reasons he could give, all the logical explanations. In the end, he simply told the truth. "Because you needed help, and we could give it." 3 months after the incident with the Kreth pirates, Dae-sung was trying to repair a coolant leak in the engine room when Ji-woo called him to the bridge. Her voice over the intercom sounded strange, excited in a way he had not heard in years. "Captain, you need to see this. We have a visitor. A paying visitor." Dae-sung set down his tools and wiped his hands on an already dirty rag. The Wanderer was still a wreck. The repairs from the fight had taken everything they had, and then some. They were still in debt to the station for parts and services. But they were alive, and the ship was flying. That counted for something. When he reached the bridge, he found Ji-woo staring at a communication request on the display. The sender's name made him pause. Ambassador Hya-jin, Velen Diplomatic Corps. "Is this the same transport we saved?" he asked. "Yes, she was one of the passengers. Now she is asking to meet with you in person." Dae-sung ran a hand through his hair. He probably looked terrible. He definitely smelled terrible. Meeting with an ambassador seemed like something you should be clean for. "Accept the meeting. Tell her she can come aboard in an hour. That gives me time to shower." Hya-jin arrived exactly on time, accompanied by 2 other Velens who looked nervous about being on a human ship. Dae-sung met them at the airlock, wearing his cleanest jumpsuit, which was still stained with engine grease. The ambassador was small, her pale blue skin almost luminescent under the ship's harsh lights. She looked at him with those large eyes, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Captain Dae-sung," she said, her voice carrying that musical quality all Velens had. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." "Of course, Ambassador. Would you like to sit? The crew quarters are not fancy, but they are clean." They settled in the small common area, the Velens sitting carefully on furniture designed for humans. Tae-yang brought tea, limping slightly from injuries that still had not fully healed. Hya-jin noticed, but said nothing. "I will be direct," she said after a moment. "My people need protection. We are engaged in trade negotiations that will determine our survival for the next century. There are parties who would prefer we fail, some through political means, some through violence." Dae-sung sipped his tea, waiting. "The Galactic Council offers security services, but they are expensive and often more interested in their own politics than our safety. I have approached several security firms. They all see my people as weak, as easy targets to guard because we cannot fight back. They do not respect us. But you think I would? I think you already proved you would. 3 months ago, you risked everything to save strangers. You asked for nothing in return. You did not see us as weak. You saw us as people who needed help." Dae-sung set down his tea. "Ambassador, I appreciate the offer, but we are just freight haulers. We are not trained security professionals. What happened with the Kreth, that was just desperation and luck." "Perhaps," Hye-jin replied. "But I do not need professional soldiers. I have met soldiers. They think in terms of acceptable losses and collateral damage. I need someone who will protect life because they believe life is worth protecting. Someone who understands that the goal is not victory, but safety. She leaned forward slightly. I need someone who will guard the door not because they are paid to, but because they believe it is right. Dae-sung looked at Ji-woo and Tai-yang. Ji-woo raised an eyebrow. Tai-yang shrugged, which with him meant he was willing to try anything once. What exactly would this job involve? Dae-sung asked. Over the next hour, Hye-jin explained. The Velans were negotiating for access to agricultural worlds. Their home system was dying, the sun slowly expanding. They needed new places to grow food, new worlds to eventually relocate to. But other species wanted those same worlds, and some of those species were willing to kill to get them. I cannot make you warriors, Hye-jin said, but you can make us safer. Teach us to recognize danger, help us prepare for emergencies. Be present when presence alone might deter violence. And if violence comes anyway? Dae-sung asked. Then I trust you will do what you did before, whatever is necessary to protect life. The contract was fair, more than fair. It would pay enough to repair the Wanderer properly, to stock supplies, to actually save some credits for the future. But Dae-sung found himself hesitating not because of the money, but because of what it meant. If I do this, he said slowly, other humans will call me a mercenary. The galaxy already fears us. They will say I am just a human doing what humans do best, fighting. Let them say it, Hye-jin replied. I know the truth. You are a human doing what the best of humans do, protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Dae-sung accepted the contract. That decision changed everything. The first few weeks were strange. The Velans did not understand security in any traditional sense. Their species had never known war, never needed guards or weapons or locked doors. Teaching them was like trying to explain color to someone who had never seen. But Sung-mi, the medic who joined the crew specifically for this job, found a way. She was patient and kind, explaining threats not in terms of violence, but in terms of health and safety. A door was not a barrier against enemies, but a protection against environmental hazards. Emergency drills were not military exercises, but medical preparations. Bo-ra, the youngest of the crew, had a talent for logistics. She designed evacuation routes, safe rooms, communication protocols, all of it framed not as defensive measures, but as common-sense planning. The Velans responded to that. Planning they understood. Dae-sung spent most of his time simply watching and learning. He learned that Velans communicated through subtle gestures humans could barely see. He learned that they found loud noises physically painful. He learned that they valued consensus over command, agreement over orders, and slowly, carefully, he adapted his methods. He did not turn the Velans into soldiers. He did not teach them to fight. Instead, he taught them to survive, to recognize when someone's intentions did not match their words, to trust their instincts when something felt wrong, to call for help before danger arrived instead of after. You are not making them like you, Tai-yang observed one day. You are making them better at being themselves. That is the point, Dae-sung replied. The galaxy does not need more warriors. It needs the Velans to stay exactly as they are, peaceful, intelligent, kind. Our job is to make sure they can be those things safely. News of the arrangement spread slowly through the galactic community. Some species mocked it. Humans guarding pacifists, warriors protecting those who refused to fight. It seemed absurd. But other species, the smaller ones, the weaker ones, the ones who had always been prey for the strong, they noticed. They saw that the Velans were thriving under human protection. They saw that the humans asked for nothing except fair payment. They saw that Dae-sung's crew treated the Velans with respect, as equals, not as lesser beings who needed to be saved. And quietly, cautiously, some of them began to wonder. If humans could be trusted by the Velans, perhaps they could be trusted by others too. Hee-jin noticed the change. One evening, after a long day of negotiations, she found Dae-sung standing at an observation window, looking out at the stars. "You have given my people something we have never had before," she said. "A security team?" "No. The confidence to stand firm. We have always been afraid, always backing down, always accepting less than we needed because we knew we could not defend ourselves. But with you at our backs, we can negotiate from a position of strength, not because you will fight for us, but because others know you will." Dae-sung smiled slightly. That was the idea. "The council is watching you," Hye-jin warned. "They do not like change. They do not trust humans. They will test you." "I know." "And when they do?" Dae-sung turned to face her. "Then they will see what you already know, that humans can be more than what our history says we are. We can be better. We are choosing to be better." The day everything went wrong started like any other day on Harmony 7 Station. Dae-sung walked the perimeter of the Velan quarters, checking exits and entry points, nodding to the station security he passed. Ji-woo monitored the communication channels from their command post. Tai-yang ran diagnostics on the security systems they had installed. Sung-mi was teaching a group of Velan assistants basic first aid. Bo-ra reviewed the day's schedule, looking for potential vulnerabilities. It all seemed routine. That should have been the first warning. Ambassador Hee-jin was in the negotiation chamber with representatives from 4 other species, finalizing the agricultural treaty. Months of work were coming to a conclusion. The Velans would get access to 3 viable worlds, enough to ensure their species' survival. It was a good deal, a fair deal. But the Kreth Syndicate had wanted those same worlds, and they had not forgotten the human ship that had interfered with their operations 6 months ago. The first sign of trouble was a power fluctuation. Small, barely noticeable. Tai-yang caught it on his instruments and frowned. "That is weird," he muttered into his communicator. "The backup generators just activated in Section 7, but there is no primary power failure reported." "Check it out," Dae-sung replied. "Take Sung-mi with you." The second sign was the stranger who walked past the Velan quarters 3 times in 10 minutes. Different clothes each time, different species, but the same distinctive gait. Bo-ra spotted it on the security feeds. "Captain," she said quietly, "we have someone casing the location." Dae-sung's instincts, honed by years of surviving in dangerous places, suddenly screamed at him that something was very wrong. He pressed the alert button on his communicator, the signal that told his whole team to go to high alert. "Ji-woo, seal the Velan quarters. Bo-ra, get Ambassador Hye-jin on a secure channel. Tell her to evacuate the negotiation chamber using the secondary exit we planned. Tai-yang, Sung-mi, get back here now." Things happened very fast after that. The stranger who had been casing the quarters suddenly pulled out a weapon and fired at the door. But the door was already closing, heavy blast shields dropping into place exactly as Dae-sung had designed them. The shot ricocheted harmlessly off reinforced metal. More attackers appeared, 6 of them, all armed. Kreth, just as Dae-sung had suspected. They moved with military precision, spreading out to cover all exits. Station alarms began to blare. The overhead speakers crackled with emergency announcements. But Dae-sung knew that station security would take time to arrive. Time the Velans did not have. "This is station security to all combatants," a voice boomed over the communicators. "Cease hostile action immediately. This is council jurisdiction. Stand down." The Kreth ignored the order. They began placing explosive charges on the blast door. Dae-sung counted in his head. 30 seconds until those charges breached the door. Maybe 2 minutes until station security arrived. Not enough time. He stepped out from cover, his weapon held low but ready. "You need to leave, now." The Kreth leader, A scarred veteran with cybernetic enhancements laughed. The human. I remember you. You cost us a prize. Now you will cost us nothing. I am giving you one chance to walk away. Station security has ordered you to stand down, human. This is not your jurisdiction. Step aside. No. The Kreth leader's expression hardened. Then you will die protecting prey animals who cannot even thank you properly. Maybe, but they will be alive to try. The first shot came from the left. Dae Sung was already moving, years of training taking over. He returned fire, forcing the Kreth to seek cover. The corridor erupted into chaos. Jiwoo's voice crackled in his ear. Captain, I am sealing blast doors between you and their reinforcements. You are going to be trapped in there with them. Do it. The heavy doors slammed shut, cutting off the Kreth's escape route. Now it was just Dae Sung and 6 armed attackers in a narrow corridor. The odds were not good, but Dae Sung was not trying to win. He was trying to buy time. He used every trick he knew. He used the station's architecture, forcing the Kreth to come at him from predictable angles. He used their own aggression against them, letting them waste ammunition on shots that had no chance of hitting. He kept moving, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted effectively. Tae Yang and Sung Mi arrived from the other direction, their arrival announced by weapons fire that caught the Kreth in a crossfire. Now the odds were slightly better. 3 humans against 6 Kreth. Still bad, but survivable. The charges are armed, Bo-Ra's voice warned. 20 seconds to breach. Inside the Velen quarters, the evacuation was proceeding exactly as they had practiced. Heejin moved calmly through the corridors, following the routes Bo-Ra had designed, leading her people to the reinforced safe room. They were afraid, terrified even, but they were not panicking. The training was working. 10 seconds, Bo-Ra counted down. Dae Sung made a decision. He charged forward, surprising the Kreth with his aggression. He had no plan, no strategy. He just knew that if those charges went off, the Velens might be exposed. He reached the blast door just as the explosives detonated. The force of the explosion threw him backwards, his armor absorbing most of the impact, but not all. He hit the wall hard, seeing stars, but the door held, damaged, scarred, but intact. The Kreth had underestimated human engineering, or overestimated their own explosives. Either way, the Velens were still safe. Station security finally arrived, pouring into the corridor with weapons drawn and orders shouted. The Kreth, seeing that their mission had failed, tried to flee. Some made it, some did not. Dae Sung sat against the wall, breathing hard, checking himself for injuries. Nothing major. Bruises, burns, maybe a cracked rib. He would live. Overseer Thrain himself arrived minutes later, his massive form filling the corridor. He looked at the blast marks, the disabled Kreth attackers, the human security team that had somehow held off a professional hit squad. Captain Dae Sung, Thrain said, his voice unreadable. Station security ordered you to stand down. You refused. You engaged in combat in council jurisdiction. You could be arrested for this. Dae Sung looked up at the massive insectoid. You were not here when the Velens called for help 6 months ago. You were not here when they were dying. I was, so until Ambassador Hyojin herself tells me to leave, I am staying right here. That is not your decision to make. Yes, it is. I made a promise. I keep my promises. For a long moment, Thrain said nothing. Then he gestured to his security team. Take statements from everyone. Review all security footage. I want a complete report. As station security began their investigation, Dae Sung slowly got to his feet. His communicator buzzed. Hyojin's voice came through, shaken but steady. Captain, my people are safe. All of them. The evacuation protocols worked exactly as you designed them. We sealed ourselves in the safe room using the emergency procedures Bo-Ra taught us. We called for help using the communication systems Tae Yang installed. We administered first aid to those who were frightened using the techniques Sung Mi showed us. You did not just protect us today. You taught us how to protect ourselves. Dae-sung smiled despite the pain. That was always the plan, Ambassador. The Council is very interested in how a small human security team defeated a Kreth assault squad. We did not defeat them. We just held the door until help arrived. There is a difference. Is there? It looks the same from where I stand. Dae-sung looked at the scarred blast door, at his injured team, at the controlled chaos of the investigation. The test is not over yet, Ambassador. Thrain is going to make this difficult. Let him try. My people know who kept them safe today. The galaxy will know it too. The council chamber was packed. Word had spread about the attack, about the human security team that had defied station authority to protect their clients. Every species wanted to see what would happen next. Would the humans be punished? Would the Velans lose their protection? Would the council make an example of those who dared to ignore their orders? Dae-sung stood in the center of the chamber again, just as he had weeks before. But this time was different. This time there were burn marks on his armor. This time Tai-Yang stood beside him on crutches, his leg in a medical brace. This time, Sung-mi had bandages visible on her arms where shrapnel had cut through her uniform. This time, everyone knew exactly what humans were willing to do. Overseer Thrain rose from his seat, his presence commanding absolute silence. We are here to address a serious matter. Captain Dae-sung and his team engaged in armed combat within Council jurisdiction, directly defying orders from station security to stand down. This is a violation of station protocols and Council authority. Murmurs ran through the chamber. Dae-sung kept his face neutral, waiting. However, Thrain continued, we must also acknowledge that this team successfully defended Velan civilians from a coordinated assassination attempt by the Kreth Syndicate. An attack that our own security failed to prevent or even detect until it was already underway. The murmurs grew louder. This was not what anyone had expected. Thrain's multiple eyes focused on Dae-sung. So I will ask you again, Captain. Why should peaceful species trust humans with their safety? Your people have a history of violence. You carry weapons. You solve problems with force. Why should anyone believe you are different from the Kreth you fought against? Dae-sung took a breath. He was tired, sore, and had not slept in 36 hours. But this was important. This was the moment that would define everything. You are right, Overseer. Humans have a violent history. We fought wars that almost destroyed us. We built weapons before we built proper homes. We hurt each other over resources, over beliefs, over things that seem meaningless now. He paused, looking around the chamber at all the different species watching him. But we learned something from that history. We learned that strength without purpose is just destruction. We learned that the ability to hurt others is worthless compared to the ability to protect them. We learned that the strongest among us do not have the right to dominate the weak. They have the responsibility to defend them. Hyojin stepped forward from where she had been standing with the Velan delegation. May I speak, Overseer? Thrain gestured his permission. I will tell you why we trust humans, Hyojin said, her musical voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Not because they are warriors, though they are. Not because they have weapons, though they do. We trust them because when we were helpless, when we were dying in the dark with pirates circling our ship, these humans came. They were not soldiers then. They were just freight haulers, barely surviving themselves. But they came anyway. She looked at Dae-sung with those large, expressive eyes. They damaged their ship saving us. They used ammunition they could not replace. One of them was injured and spent weeks recovering. And when we asked why they did it, expecting demands for payment or gratitude or debt, do you know what they said? The chamber was absolutely silent. They said, because you needed help, and we could give it. As if that was the only reason anyone should ever need. Hyojin turned to face the council. That is why we trust humans. Not because they can fight, but because they understand what fighting should be for. Not conquest, not domination, but protection. Defense, giving the weak a chance to remain weak without being destroyed for it. Another voice spoke up from the audience. It was a representative of the Minathi, a small species known for their scholarship and terrible combat abilities. The Minathi Council has voted to request human security consultation. We face similar threats to the Velans. Then another species spoke, and another. 6 different delegations, all small, all vulnerable, all asking for human help. Thrain raised a massive claw for silence. This is unprecedented. Humans are new to the galactic community. We do not know if they can be trusted on this scale. With respect, Overseer, Dae-Sung said quietly, you do know. You have seen it. 3 months ago, we had nothing. We were nobody. We had every reason to ignore that distress call and save ourselves. We did not. Yesterday, we had every reason to obey station security and let the professionals handle the threat. We did not. Not because we are reckless, but because we made a promise. He straightened despite his injuries. You ask why the Velans let us guard their door. I will tell you. Because I protected them first. Before there was profit in it. Before there was recognition. Before anyone asked. That is what you can trust. Not our weapons. Not our strength. But our choice to use those things in defense of those who cannot defend themselves. Tae Yang spoke up, his voice rough with pain. In human history, we have a saying, with great power comes great responsibility. For too long, we ignored that. We used our power for ourselves. Millions died because the strong refused to protect the weak. Now we are trying to do better, to be better. Sungmi added, we are not perfect. We still make mistakes. But we are trying to learn from our past instead of repeating it. Thrain was quiet for a long moment. The entire chamber waited for his judgment. I have reviewed the security footage, he finally said. All of it. I saw how Captain Dae-Sung positioned himself between the attackers and the Velan quarters. I saw how his team created a defensive perimeter with no thought for their own escape. I saw humans taking injuries meant for aliens they barely know. He paused. I also saw something else. I saw Velans evacuating in perfect order, following protocols they had clearly practiced. I saw them sealing blast doors, establishing communication, treating injuries. Captain Dae-Sung, you did not just protect the Velans. You taught them to protect themselves. That was always the goal, Overseer. Why? Why empower them instead of keeping them dependent on you? Would that not ensure continued employment? Dae-Sung smiled slightly. Because the point is not to make them need us forever. The point is to keep them safe. If they can do some of that themselves, then they are safer. That matters more than job security. Thrain's mandibles clicked together in what might have been approval. I am submitting a report to the Galactic Council with a new recommendation. It will state that human security contractors have demonstrated not only combat capability, but, more importantly, restraint and genuine care for client welfare. I will recommend that restrictions on human security operations be lifted. The chamber erupted in noise. Some species cheered. Others protested. The debate would continue for months, Dae-Sung knew. But something had changed. A door had opened. After the session ended, Dae-Sung and his team made their way back to their quarters on the station. They were exhausted, injured, and facing weeks of debriefings and investigations. But they had achieved something important. Hye-Jin found them there, her 2 assistants carrying packages. My people asked me to give you these. Traditional Velan gifts of gratitude. I tried to explain that you do not do this for gifts. But they insisted. We will accept them with honor, Dae-Sung said. Hye-Jin looked at him seriously. Other species are watching now. You know that, yes? What you have built here, this partnership between warriors and pacifists, it could change how the galaxy works. Or it could fail spectacularly and prove that humans cannot be trusted. I know. So no pressure, but the fate of human integration into galactic society might rest on your shoulders. Dae-sung laughed despite himself. When you put it that way, it sounds almost manageable. Later, standing at the observation window looking out at the stars, Ji-woo joined him. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she asked. "Refusing to stand down? Defying the council?" "All of it. Taking this job, risking everything, trying to prove that humans can be more than what the galaxy expects." Dae-sung thought about the question. He thought about the Velen transport, drifting helpless in space. He thought about Hyejin's voice asking why they had helped. He thought about the blast door, scarred but holding, keeping innocent people safe. "Yes," he said simply, "we did the right thing. Not because it was easy or safe or profitable, but because when someone calls for help in the dark and you can answer, you should. That is what being human should mean. Not the wars we fought or the weapons we made, but the choice to protect instead of destroy, to build instead of tear down, to answer the call." Ji-woo smiled. "That is a nice thought. Do you think the galaxy will believe it?" "Some will. Some already do. And maybe that is enough. We start with the species that need protection. We prove ourselves one mission at a time. We show through actions, not words, that humans can be trusted. And if we fail, then we fail honestly, doing our best to protect those who need it. I can live with that." From across the station, in the Velen quarters that were finally being cleaned and repaired, Ambassador Hyejin looked at her people. They were shaken, certainly, but they were alive, and they were stronger than they had been before, educated in survival, empowered to defend themselves. She thought about the human captain who had risked everything for strangers, who had defied authority to keep a promise, who had taught her people that being peaceful did not mean being helpless. The galaxy would change because of this, she knew. Maybe not today. Maybe not even soon, but it would change, because now there was proof that strength and compassion were not opposites, that warriors could protect without dominating, that humans, for all their violent history, could choose to be guardians instead of conquerors. And it had all started with a simple question in the dark. Why did you help us? Because you needed help, and we could give it. Sometimes, Hyejin thought, the simplest answer was the truest one.